course, we're going to be exploring a term that you've probably heard quite a bit. That term is API, or Application Programming Interface. In addition to being able to recite what it stands for, when you complete this course, you'll be able to discuss what an API does, you'll understand why they exist, and you'll be able to list the many benefits that they provide. You'll even get some hands-on experience using a few popular web APIs, which will give you a taste of what all this excitement is about. We'll be starting from the very beginning, so there really isn't too much I'm going to be expecting you to know before starting this course. I would like to request that you have a touch of experience with coding and a wee bit of knowledge about the web. If you've written any program at all, even the typical first program, you know, the one where you write the words, "Hello world"? If you've done that in any programming language, you'll pretty much be ready for this course. It will be helpful if you have a basic understanding of how the web works with
I
web
can do the
servers
hello
and
world.
browsers, but don't sweat it. We'll touch on that too. Now, if you haven't met these requirements, please check the notes attached to this video for where to get started with some beginning web and programming concepts. That reminds me, you should take some time to get used to your learning environment. The notes that I just discussed are attached to this video, and I'll also drop more information into that section to keep you updated on what might have changed from my right now to your right now. And I'll do my best to remind you to look in there when there's something I think you just have to see, but you really should get in the habit of checking that area out. There'll be tons of juicy information there. You might be getting a real bad case of deja vu right now. This is a refresh of a course from 2019, which these days seems like about 30 years ago or something. If you saw that version, welcome back. Technology is constantly evolving, and just updating the notes wasn't cutting it, so this is version 2. Thanks for all the feedback, by the way. A lot of yours and your fellow learners' suggestions are implemented in this new updated version. All that to say, we got you. These videos have captions, so if you feel like you might benefit from having those on, please use them. This space is all yours. If you want me to speak slower, please use the speed controllers to slow me down. And if I'm taking a long time, speed me up. I make a pretty good chipmunk. And last, but certainly not least, take advantage of the fact that you are in a video-based course. If you need me to repeat myself, use the video controls to rewind me. If you feel like you need to take a break to let something sink in, by all means, please pause me. I'll be right here waiting for you. I know that I've got into some pretty bad viewing habits with all the streaming media. Now, while binging might be a great way to consume an entire season of your favorite show, it's not the best way to learn something new. Education isn't meant to be binged. And because of this, I'll probably remind you quite a bit to take breaks and
Education is not supposed to be binged.
encourage you to let what you just learned marinate. All right, let's get to it. API. Those 3 little letters generate quite the buzz, don't they? First, I'd like to take some time up front here and clearly break down what is meant by Application Programming Interface. By understanding its purpose and a touch of its history, I think you'll start to see its importance and begin to understand why this term keeps popping up in your life. After we get a good grasp on the what and the why of APIs, we'll go and learn how to explore 2 existing ones. We'll get familiar with several handy tools that you can use to interact with web-based APIs. We'll use those tools to hit an external web API to send actual text messages, and we'll get some interesting data back from a streaming music service API. Once we get some practice using the APIs, we'll use them in a web application that you'll actually publish. The application that we're going to be building is going to receive user-submitted photos via a text message, and then we'll use an API to display a collection of all these photos. And you get to come up with the prompt. Send me the latest photo on your phone. Dog pics, please. What's for dinner? Whatever you want. I can't wait to see what you build and what your family and friends submit to it. We're going to be strictly using APIs in this course. We won't be writing our own. While you most likely are going to end up learning some best practices in API design, we won't be covering that specifically. There are many great courses available that show the creation thought process, and I've linked to some of my faves in the notes attached to this video. In my opinion, the best way to start learning about any acronym is to focus on each individual letter. For API, I think we should start on that last character, the I, interface. let's talk a bit about the interfaces that you've seen already.
I've seen, what have I seen?
Interfaces are all around us.
What?
For instance, this radio here, it has a familiar interface. The interface allows me to do things like change the volume, change the station. I can turn it off and on. I literally have no idea how anything inside this thing works. But still, the interface allows me to control the way that it works through the options that are exposed. And that's pretty great, isn't it? The magic that is happening is completely abstracted away from me. I'm still in control of what has been determined that I, a user, can handle. Interfaces usually evolve over time. Like an alarm clock radio, for example. It has my familiar volume and station controls, and it also adds some new features, like changing the time and setting the alarm. I still have no idea how this works implementation-wise, but the interface is something that I can understand. Usually. And as technology evolves and new options come into existence, they make their way into the new versions of the interface, still abstracting away things for us, but enabling us to be in control of the new features. Sometimes these physical interfaces get so recognizable, they even make it into GUIs. Hey, did you hear that? There it is again, GUI, G-U-I, Graphical User Interface. This is my streaming music app on my phone.
How is this free?
There's my familiar play button in the user interface, or UI. And I know what the play button does when I press it, but I have no idea how it does it. And I'm okay with that level of abstraction.
What would I do in public transit without music? Like talk to people?
Hi.
How's it going?
Now, the developer who wrote this streaming music application, of course, understands how the play button works. She coded the button so that when it gets clicked, the music starts playing. Here's the thing, though. Our developer is also working with quite a few interfaces that are abstracting away some of the details for her. For instance, she wrote code that happens when the button is clicked. She probably did that using an event handler on the button, like onClick. What she didn't have to do, however, was write the code that makes the button interact and change with the press. She didn't have to write the code that makes that familiar clicking noise. It was already there for her. Buttons are, in fact, an interface. They provide the developer the means of controlling its interactions while abstracting away how that actually works implementation-wise. This button is part of the API, or Application Programming Interface, and it's available from the application framework that was used to create the app. Because most apps need buttons, this interface has been created and provided to our developer, or application programmer, to use. By implementing the button interface, our developer was able to make her code run when the button was clicked. It's worth noting that the code probably also uses a media player API that is provided with the operating system of the device, like Android or iOS. This media player API abstracts away needing to understand details of how to send audio data to hardware. The developer knows they just want to call the play method on the media player API. I suppose, too, the song isn't stored on the device. It's being streamed over the network. So a web-based API call has been made over the internet to get that data. It's actually APIs all the way down to the ones and zeros, providing abstractions at many levels. So let's take a look at what all of these interfaces have in common. They all define ways for us to interact or communicate with an object, whether that object be physical or software. And as a user of the interface, we don't need to understand the implementation. We don't need to know how it works. We just need to know what we've been allowed to change or see. Interfaces abstract away the implementation. Now, while the UI or user interface is made for the user of the application, the API is made for the application programmer to use and extend in their applications. With the I covered in our API, let's take a deeper look at the rest of the API acronym. An API is a contract of sorts. It defines how it is expected to be used, and it defines what you can expect to receive by using it. Think of it as a set of tools designed for software developers, like yourself, to use. An API is created to help make your life easier by giving you access to data and by providing you with an abstraction of the implementation. You know, not needing to know how it's doing whatever it's doing. They save you from needing to create everything yourself. Like, when designed well, they make nearly impossible things happen with just a few lines of code. Now, you're probably starting to see why it's important to get familiar with them, right? I want to do a quick word of warning here about some naming issues that you'll probably run into. These days, the term API is almost always used as a way to explain web-based APIs. In fact, it's probably safe to assume that when you hear API in the wild, it's most likely that people are talking about a web-based API. We'll explore those here in a few. However, if we focus on all types of APIs instead of just the web-based subset, we'll get a better look into why web-based APIs are so popular. So hang tight, we're getting there. APIs are everywhere in your software journey, just about everywhere you look. Your programming language, whichever one that might be, provides many APIs. Let's take a look at one that is common in all of them. They all provide some way of working with strings, you know, like a series of characters. Want to make your text all uppercase? Just call the API method and voila. You could probably create the uppercase string all by yourself by doing some sort of low-level bit math on each character, but you don't need to, because your programming language has abstracted away that for you and provided a handy string API. It exists because this is a common enough problem that developers run into. Because
E to uppercase. Upper. These are all different like functions.
It exists because this is a common enough problem that developers run into. Because these programming language specifications are just interfaces, different operating systems can supply their own implementation so that the code works properly in their environment. I think an easy way of picturing this is to think about how different operating systems like Windows or Mac OS maintain their files. They're totally different. Yet your programming language provides a single API for working with the file system. You can write one script and it works both in Mac and Windows. It's the implementation that takes care of
List files and directories in the current working directory.
all of the details for you. Pretty cool, right? Definitely something to be thankful for. It makes our lives so much easier not having to worry about what operating system is being used. And the importance of an API to a language cannot be understated. There have been some fascinating legal cases where it's been questioned if the language API itself, again, not the implementation, can be copyrighted. Check out the notes for more on that. Along similar lines, there are different web browsers, you know, like Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Safari, Firefox, Brave. Now, you might not have pondered this before, but isn't it amazing that you can write code for the web and it will work in any of them? This works because there's a set of web APIs that web browsers all must implement in order to make that magic happen for you. We're standing on the shoulders of giants in order to make.
This is a list of all the APIs that are available. Ambient light events, background tasks, battery API, beacon, Bluetooth API, broadcast channel API, CSS counter styles, CSS font loading API, CSS console API, credential management API, DOM encoding API, encrypted media extensions. Dude, this is the I got an itch on my leg. It's my leg, I promise. Encoding API, encrypted media extensions, French API, file system API, frame timing API, full screen API, gamepad API, HTML drag and drop API, high resolution time, history API, image capture API, index database, long tasks API, media capabilities API, media capture and streams, media session API, media source extension, media stream recording, navigation, time and read, network information APIs, pages.
Make that magic happen for you. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, folks, and we really should thank those giants more often. There are authors and maintainers of libraries that package up code to solve common problems so that you don't need to do it yourself. For
Yeah.
instance, do you know how to programmatically make a photo black and white? Me neither,
No.
but I can download and import an image package into my application, and suddenly I can. I just call a method and boom. I wish real life skills worked this way. I'd import dancing so it could be more fun at weddings. Cha-cha-cha. Frameworks provide an API that allow you to extend what has been provided to make it your own. Like, for example, most web frameworks provide you with the ability to add a new route to your web application. It allows you to write out dynamic data to a template that you specify.
Modern web applications use meaningful URLs to help users. Users are more likely to like a page and come back if the page uses meaningful URL that they can remember and use to directly visit a page. Use the route decorator to bind a function to a URL. It's the route decorator to bind a function to a URL. Route what at app that route bongo def index return index page hat hello return. You can do more. You can make parts of the URL dynamic and attach multiple rules to a function.
And you do all of this with just
You can add variable sections to a URL by bringing the sections with a variable name. What?
a handful of lines of code. You don't need to understand how it's doing things, but you do need to know how to write an implementation to what the framework is expecting. In this case, you're using the API, the contract, to write a valid implementation that meets the requirements. Now, all these APIs that we just talked about, they're local to our code base. They exist within our code. We use them to avoid recreating the wheel. That is to say, they assist us in accomplishing tasks that we need to perform by abstracting away a ton of the work for us, the stuff that we developers shouldn't be worrying about. We should be focusing on the business problem at hand. And that means a big part of your job is figuring out how to leverage these APIs to your advantage. Now, I think this is an excellent time for you to take a break. I just gave you a lot to think about, and I'd like you to take some time and breathe. Why don't you jot down some APIs that you've used today, even if you weren't coding? I know that you've seen some in action. If you're having a hard time thinking of some, I'll give you a hint. You're watching a video right now inside of a web browser. When we return, we'll explore the concept of remote APIs, ones that aren't executing locally in our codebase, and why that is such a powerful concept.
I don't know anything. Oh, it's suggesting to like take a little cat nap. I'll do it. It knew it broke my brain. This thing knew it broke my brain. Why not take a little cat nap?
might have just done that.
I'm not sure what to do now.
It took me a while to find this remote control. It was in the couch. It's always in the couch. Anyways, this remote has an interface on it, right? There's a power button. And when I press the channel button, it changes the channel. When I press the volume button, it sends the request to my radio, and the volume changes as if I turn the volume up using the interface on the device itself. And we know why that's important. I want to remotely control my device. I don't want to get up from my chair. There are, of course, more less lazy reasons as to why we'd want to remotely control objects. This cute little robot, for instance, has a remote API. You can send commands to it, and it responds, and it even sends back sensor information. These traffic signs can change based on an API call. This drone here is remotely controlled by an app on my phone. See? And it's not just physical objects that benefit from remote APIs. Oftentimes, we don't have space on our local machines for all the data that's available. Like, for example, have you ever used one of those apps that helps you figure out what song is playing? You send up a snippet of a song that you heard playing at a grocery store using your microphone, and it sends back exactly what song it is. It's usually Phil Collins. It turns out that both grocery stores and yours truly love Phil Collins. You don't have room for all the songs in the world on your phone, and with this remote API, you don't need to have all of them. It does all the searching and processing, and it's surprisingly quick. How can it possibly do that? I don't know, but I love the interface. It's so fast. Ooh, that's another benefit of remote APIs, computational power. Because an API removes the limitations of your local device, you can gain access to seemingly infinite amounts of power. A good example of this is the AR app of Google Translate. You can use the camera on your phone, and in near real time, it's able to translate directly to your screen, like instantaneously. It's using a ton of processing power to make that magic happen, and that processing is happening elsewhere, in La Nube. It took quite a bit of experimentation and some evolution of ideas, but over time, we finally turned this remote API dream into a reality. Now, I'm going to drop some history into the teacher's notes, but I just want you to know that the struggle to achieve this concept of remote APIs was very real. Now, most of the problem was that there wasn't a standard that everyone loved. Things were pretty clunky for a while as these ideas were sussed out. But then it happened. A new architectural style appeared that was clear and it allowed us developers to interact with specific resources over the web, and it quite literally exist within our code. We use them to avoid recreating the wheel. That is to say, they assist us
Should I play some SOD? Surely I could play some Season of Discovery.
And accomplishing tasks that we need to perform by abstracting.
Alright. Call my channel. Let's do World of Warcraft. Let's do title this. So D. Phone call.